All right, here we are for the last round of breakout sessions, and we're going to start with Ray Stefani, who is an emeritus professor of engineering from Cal State University, Long Beach. Is it okay if I say Cal State?
That's what we are.
All right, that's right. All right, his sports publications are divided between individual sports and team sports. He's done 75 of each. He seeks a fundamental understanding of the physics, physiology, causes of gender differential performance, rates of improvement, effect of historical events, and effects of performance-enhancing drugs related to Olympic gold medal performances in athletics, track and field, swimming, rowing, and speed skating. He has analyzed Olympic home nation medal advantage and developed a least squared team rating system applied to predicting the outcome of more than 20,000 games of American football, basketball, European soccer, Australian rules football, and Super Rugby. And there's a lot more to be said, but I'd rather let Ray just get into his presentation. So, help you in welcoming Ray Stefani.
I have a feeling I need to shorten my bio for the next time. And by the way, since we're all sports analysts, how many miles do you have so far?
Almost 6 now.
She's got 6 miles just going back and forth, getting all the equipment working. Yeah, well, if we're going to talk about rating, finding ways to predict winners in international competition, maybe there's some international sports you're not familiar with. Like, for example, wushu. How do you do that and walk away? Or, this is foot volleyball. That is the foot, that is the volleyball, and I have no idea how a human can do that and walk afterwards. Then if you like a gentle sport like hurling, this guy here made the mistake of holding the ball in his hand while this guy broke his stick over his head. It's a Gaelic sport. They like hitting each other with sticks. I'm half Gaelic. Anyway, big dudes in India play kabaddi. It's a combination of tag, wrestling, holding your breath, and probably taking steroids. Even bigger guys are involved in sumo wrestling. Even bigger than that are dragon boats. Just amazing workmanship, raw speed. Now let's go underwater. There actually is underwater hockey. No skates, but you flick a lead puck along the bottom of the pool. Here's what you're going to like: underwater rugby. Okay, I'm pulling your leg. That is not underwater rugby. I have no idea who those guys are, but they got a good sense of humor, and I hope they survived the photo shoot. That is underwater rugby. You stuff a ball into a basket underwater. Breathing is discouraged. All right, well, we got to decide which sports we are going to work with. In my publications, I come up with 169 recognized sports in the world, 39 in the Winter Olympics, summer, 15 in the winter, 68 more that can be in the Olympics at the request of the organizing committee, coming to 122. Sport Accord is kind of like a junior Olympic committee. They have 21 more they recognize, and I found 26 more in Wikipedia that have federations and actual activity. We're going to narrow that down to the 108 that actually have official rating systems, which immediately leaves out esports, which is probably the fastest growing competition in the world. And according to the chairman, Thomas Bach, could be in the Olympics. Further narrowing it down, I'm not going to consider what are called mind sports like chess and checkers, although they are recognized by the IOC, they're non-physical. Now, combat sports, wrestling, boxing, have direct contact between the competitors, but the problem is the rating systems are subjective and the judging is subjective, so I'm not going to mix that with objective sports. What I call independent sports, there's 59 of those. You're not supposed to contact your opponent, running, swimming, and so on. Now the thing is, you rank order that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could do it based on a rating system which exists. You would have to do the same in competition. And it's hard to compare that kind of rating with head-to-head competition. So I am not going to consider the 59 independent sports with a rating system. That leaves us what I call an object sport. The contact is to control an object: football, baseball, basketball, hockey. 18 of those are not true team sports, leaving us with 18 that are. 5 do not have a world championship, so this is as complete and comprehensive listing as I can get. That leaves 13 team sports that are recognized, have official rating systems, and have world championships. All are either in the Olympics or can be, except rugby league. Men and women compete in 10 of these. They're all in the Olympics: basketball, curling, field hockey, football, soccer if you wish. Now, there are 2 different systems in soccer. One by men, one for men, one for women. So I have to separate the soccer data. Handball, ice hockey, rugby sevens, rugby union, volleyball, and water polo. I'm going to talk to you about rugby in a moment. There are 2 kinds of cricket. A one-day international, each team bats once. One-day international lasts about 7 hours, T20 about 2.5. There are 300 pitches per team here, no more than 120 there. You can complete it in your lifetime, actually in one day. We have to separate those, so now we're up to 15. Rugby league is only for men, netball only for women. I'll talk to you a bit more about netball in a little bit. Okay, so we have altogether 10 and 1 is 11 for women rather, 12 for men. What I have found for the 12 men and 11 women sports, 23 competitions, I have 56 world championships and almost 3,000 matches. So it's as comprehensive a list as I can give you. Now let's talk about rugby very briefly. You might think that American football, Canadian football, and rugby are like distant cousins. They're triplets. In 1871, the rugby union formed, separating rugby football from association, or SOCC, soccer, football. Beginning in 1876, the US, Canada, and the rest of the world played exactly the same game with exactly the same rules. From 1869 to 1876, we actually played, we called it football, it was soccer. After 1876, we played rugby. We did not invent our own game. Here's what happened, it's very interesting. In 1905, I'm not talking concussions, 18 died playing football in the United States. 18 were killed. Somehow the President of the United States, who didn't tweet at the time, the President of the United States, he took this guy seriously, Theodore Roosevelt. He was going to outlaw football unless we made it safer. We legalized the forward pass, effective 1906, created 4 downs for 10 yards and the line of scrimmage was widened. Canada accepted the forward pass in 1929. We did not invent our own game. By mandate, we made it safer. That's all that happened. We didn't invent a forward pass. Everybody wanted to, it's just illegal. Okay, finally, the rules, scoring rules evolved, so all 3 are really scored the same. A converted try in rugby is 5 plus 2 is 7. US and Canada, most of our conversions are 6 plus 1 is 7, not counting 2-point conversion, of course. And a field goal, the equivalent of a field goal, is 3 in all 3 versions. So again, we're triplets, not cousins, distant cousins. Now rugby sevens, as the name implies, have 7 players playing flash games, 14 minutes flat out. And that's the one that's in the Olympics. It's really an exciting version of rugby. As far as rugby league, in 1895, professional rugby separated from amateur. Interestingly enough, that's the same game, same year we created professional football in the US. You would notice a similarity in rugby league. You have 6 tackles and attempt to score. We have 4 downs for 10 yards, kind of the same thing. Okay. Rating system. So rating is a numerical value we give to a competitor. A ranking is an ordinal order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we give based on the rating. We're not going to talk about subjective, but we are going to talk about what I call a cumulative. Results, importance, and aging by a table are converted to either positive points or 0 points. As you go over a period of years, you have a non-decreasing running sum. That's why I call them cumulative. But it does not depend on who you defeated, only what your final ranking was or position. Except for rugby league, which says that in some way their system depends on opponents. I have been completely unable to get the exact system from either the federation. I even had a pint with a guy in England that works for the company that does the rating, and he couldn't tell me what system they use. Okay, so this is 9 of my 15 sport rating combinations are cumulative. They have the least amount of information because it does not depend on who you defeated. On the other hand, these are the ones you want to pay attention to. I call them adjustive because each new rating is the previous rating plus the difference between what really happened, what was predicted to happen, and a multiplier. So with head-to-head competition, depending on who you played and how good you were compared to them, a rating is adjusted, and there are 6 of those. Now, David Kendix created the same system for cricket and netball, 2 crickets actually. Rugby Union created one for rugby. Both of them use the exact same actual, which is a 0-1 scale, 0 for losing, half for tie, 1 for win. The format of the expected is exactly the same. It depends linearly on the difference between the ratings. This divisor here and here depend on the standard deviation of a rating variation. What that does is create a probability of winning, a very simple one. For David Kendix's system, K depends on the number of games played in importance. Rugby Union, though, depends on importance in the score difference and the home advantage. It's one of the few rating systems that depend on both score difference and home advantage. The reason David Kendix's didn't was he asked the cricket and netball associations, do you want to include score or home advantage? They said no. It makes sense in cricket. You only bat once each. If the second team gets ahead, the game ends, and you really don't have a good measure of score difference. Ironically, they went first. He created a rating system. The Netball Federation, which could use score difference and could use home advantage, said, no, just give us the one that cricket's using. Well, they kind of missed out on something they could have had. But we're going to find out it didn't matter. The women's soccer uses what's called the ELO system. ELO is a chess master. The probability of winning is it's actually an exponential in E, but it converts to 10. Depending on the standard deviation of the team rating, usually this denominator is 400. They also use, and they're one of the few that use score difference, but they use an ad hoc table for score difference. I'm going to tell you how you could create a really outstanding rating system. Use this for the expected result. Go ahead and make sigma 200 so that the rating distribution has a standard deviation of 200. But here's what you can do. If you want to include score, take this exact same equation, make D the score difference, and make sigma the standard deviation of the score. Now you have an outstanding rating system where the actual depends on the score, the expected is the probability of winning, and it's a very powerful system. And the K value, based on my study of similar systems, should be between 20 and 40 if the standard deviation of a rating is 200, between 0.1 and 0.2. You will have an outstanding rating system with not a lot of effort. Finally, for men's soccer, in 1996, they had a horrible rating system. So I sent FIFA a very detailed letter in which I said, make K depend on matches played and use an average system. you will adjust with the previous average, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to have a point system that depends on a factor times the position of the opponent. That's what I told him in 1996. I got a letter back from FIFA that said, thank you very much, we like the system the way it is, we aren't changing it. In the next 7 years, they changed it to exactly what's in the letter. But with one improvement, FIFA created an equation. The other thing I did was multiply the rating, the factors by 100, so you would get an integer rating, which they did. What they did, which is better than mine, is instead of a table, they created an equation that changes with every rating difference. It just happens to go through all the points in the table I gave them. So I guess I'm to blame for that one. These are the best ones, and I'm going to show you how they come out. Oh, the first thing I want to show you though is, this is a linear approximation to the cumulative probability, and this is another approximation, exponential. How bad is it to use a straight line approximation to a probability? Pretty good, actually. The straight line approximation is tapped at 10 to 90. The red is the exponential, the blue is a straight line, and from about 15% to 85%, there's almost no difference. So you can use the straight line approximation. It's not going to make much difference. But I really like the exponential one that Elo developed. Okay, so here's what happened. I got 15 combinations to look at. I'm going to take each set of 5. Here's the bottom 5. Remember, there's two kinds. There's the cumulative ones and the adjusted ones. The lowest is curling, which is kind of understandable. You push the rock and guys sweep after it. The rating depends on previous teams, which are really a small number of individuals that can change a lot. So it's understandable that curling is at least a probability, accuracy. Now, rugby league, handball, volleyball, and basketball, those 4 were within 1%, pretty close together. Those are all cumulative. Now let's take the middle 5. There's 2 more within 1 more percent, the 2 hockeys. One warmer than the other, field hockey and ice hockey. So we have 6 cumulative systems within 2%. Pretty tightly packed. Now we're going to move up to this top 2 from above. I'm going to skip this one. Now we're getting up to some pretty decent results, 80% and 81%. That includes the group stage and the knockout stage. What happens is the teams are divided in groups in the World Championship. You play everyone in your group. The better teams move on to the knockout stage. 1 loss and you're out. These include all the games. I did not include ties because that would mitigate against sports like soccer that have a lot of ties. But I did one thing. I looked at all the matches I could find that were tied at regulation that had to be played off, either because the sport did not have ties or were in the knockout phase. And I found out that when it was tied at regulation and they went on to finish, the favorite won as often then as they did in regulation. So it's more accurate not to include ties and just leave it at the accuracy in regulation. Okay, so the top 2, rugby sevens and water polo, are over 80%. At this point, all 9 cumulative sports combinations with rating systems are in the bottom 10. The only other one that is adjusted in the bottom 10 is the miserable one that I came up with in 1996. I did not think they would understand how to handle score difference or home advantage. Bottom line is 76% isn't all that bad in soccer. Our German friends are headed out to see the next game, which is in 2 days. Unfortunately, Mexico beat Germany this time around in the World Cup, and Senegal beat Poland, which is hard to believe. Currently, after a round or so, 67% is the figure. It'll go up. Bottom line is all nine of the point accumulation systems are in the bottom 10. The only adjusted one in the bottom 10 is the only one that involves an average. The top ones are all the other ones that are rugby union. I put at the top with 86%. I combined all of David's systems into one because of the same system. Netball as a sport was 88% accurate. The rating system picked the winner 88% of the time. If you told me that would happen, I would say, no, that's not possible. But it has happened regularly. The two crickets are 80% and 76%. All of David's systems come out at 84%. The women's ELO system at 81%. So that's a pretty good estimation. And so all of the systems I showed you that involve adjustment are at the top. And the averaging one is below it. So you want the head-to-head adjustment systems. David was going to speak to the, I had a regular review with the netball organization, and he asked me for the data here that I had, so I sent it to him. And he went to the Netball Association, and he said to me, they were thrilled that I have 88% accuracy. Then they said, how can we make it less accurate? We don't have enough upsets. Well, you make the lesser teams better. Netball, by the way, this lady right here wanted to do more than have her phys ed people climbing walls and things. So she wrote in 1895, James Naismith, who both invented basketball and is very pleased with himself. What are the rules of basketball? So he sent her the rules. As basketball was played in 1893 originally, had 9 players, you can only take 1 step with the ball. Those were the actual rules that he set, because that's the way the game was played. But he diagrammed plays for her. He divided the court into 3 parts, and he labeled the players and gave her a play, and she thought those were the rules. So today, the players in netball have to wear their position and may only be in certain parts of the court, may only take 1 step with the ball, and only certain people can shoot. So we're seeing 1895 basketball, not 7 players instead of 9, but there was no restriction on where you could play. That was a mistake. But by tradition, that's what netball is. Okay, for the adjustive systems compared to a cumulative are 7% more accurate in the group phase, but 14% more in the knockout phase, which is way more challenging because the better teams have been eliminated. Altogether, 8% better. There are some sports, 8 of the 13 rather, in which they have classification matches. What that means is many of the teams after the group phase go on only to be 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, stuff like that. And those that are in the championship round, when they lose, they go keep playing until they're 3rd and 5th, 7th, and 9th, and so on. In other words, nobody's really eliminated. When they do that and have elimination matches, what happens is you get the teams are sorted until they're very close together, and as a result of that, you have much lower predictability when there's classification versus not. But I did not expect those that have classifications to be more accurate in the group phase because they haven't had the classification matches yet. I think what happens is teams know they're going to be eliminated, and so what they do is say, okay, if they know they're going to be eliminated, we're going to play our lesser players. They don't play up to their past ability. But if they're going to have classification, they play as hard as they can because there's a position to be played for. Gender effects in the group phase, women are 3% more predictable, and it has to do with maybe the women's teams have a wider range of skill, but after you eliminate the lower teams, the women are far more competitive than the men are by 5%. This is why I like rugby. They beat the crap out of each other for 80 minutes. They don't stand there and wave their finger at the guy or go sliding across the court, the field, or jump up in the stands. They say, nice game, mate, let's go have a pint. And they do. This is Johnny Wilkinson, one of the best number 10s for England. England had just beaten Australia at Twickenham. And he's really trying to tell his counterpart, you played a good game. Don't be sad, you did your best. And this big dude here is coming over concerned that his opponent is unhappy as a result of the match. That's what we need more of in sport. We don't need all of this grandstanding and trash talking. You can be a good team and still treat your opponent with a certain amount of respect. And that's what I like about soccer, about rugby. Thank you.
We have time for one or two questions maybe before our next speaker.
Or you're tired and you just want to get coffee.
Does this cover, or do you have any opinion on it was developed by Ken Butler, the rating system for hockey? Do you know anything about?
About head injuries and that sort of thing?
No, it's called the KRACH rating.
Okay.
And it deals with looking at past probabilities of teams having played the teams previously. I haven't reviewed it recently, but I've seen it in use years ago in an ultimate frisbee league that I was in. And I thought it was really interesting, and so I tried playing around a little bit with a student.
Ultimate Frisbee. Guts Frisbee is a real cool name, I think. Yeah, I think when you play the team the second time, you're more likely to have an upset because you know something about them and their weaknesses. Occasionally in the World Cup, you will wind up, these are all world championships, you don't play the other team, unless somehow you continue on, but it has happened. But I think you've got a point. I think when you play a team the second time, you're probably going to find that you have a better chance of an upset. I haven't looked at it, and in baseball you play everybody lots of times.
Yeah.
So you would think, but then who the pitcher is important. Point is, I'm wondering if the games aren't closer as you move on in the latter parts of your series with the team. It could very well be. But you mentioned that head injury is a really important thing, which I thought you meant, but you didn't. But rugby, people, they know how to tackle. It's heads up, wrap up, and you do not need the helmet. And I showed you that for purposes of safety, that's the only reason we have the forward pass and the other thing. So we don't have to dread making changes to football.
All right. If you'd like to ask Ray any more questions, we can catch them afterwards. Anyway, round of applause for Ray. All right.